When I talk to people about their customer discovery work and, trying to figure out what's going to make a successful product and what product is going to sell, there's a common problem with what we do is that we don't want to reach out to new people. We want to keep our circles close because rejection feels comfortable when it's coming from a friend, but your friends are also probably not going to be the people that are going to tell you the hard truths. And so I really encourage people that I work with to reach outside of their network.
Hi there. Welcome to this episode of the Leadership Exchange podcast. My name is Tracy. You can follow me on Twitter at Lady Leet or on LinkedIn at Tracy S. Lee. I'm so excited to have one of my friends here today, Emily. Emily is a pediatric urologist over at Georgia Urology. And Emily, you do some other fun things with your free time. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. This is really exciting to be here, and I'm excited to be able to talk to people about all the work that we do outside of Georgia Urology in the medical device space. So I'm a medical device innovation consultant, essentially. So I started my career in this space working for the Global Center for Medical Innovations, and now I do a lot of independent consulting work for medical device startups, trying to help them figure out how to get a good product to market and how to build out product that is going to be a huge commercial success, because you can have the best idea in the world, but if no one wants to buy it, it's not impacting any patients.
Yeah, I love that. And we've definitely talked about like different interesting ways that you and this doc can like work
Mhm.
together on really fun things and just help save the world. Which I love. I love being in the healthcare life sciences space because there's just so much opportunity for innovating on things that actually matter.
Yeah, and
That's really
our
empowering.
healthcare system right now is broken. We have a chance to fix it.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
even if it's these small incremental changes that we can make, we can impact the lives of patients so dramatically that it makes you feel good about yourself as a physician. I talked to one person once and they said, they went into private equity work and they said, I can impact a few thousand patients in my career, or I can impact hundreds of thousands of patients by bringing quality products to the market.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, you told me before this podcast started that 90% of medical devices typically
Mhm.
fail.
And
Why?
I'm going to be honest, I think that that number is probably a lot higher. There's so many
Uh-huh.
ideas that people have that never even make it to the design and development stage. And there are
Hmm.
lots of different reasons why these devices are failing. Uh, when you're talking about trying to get them just past the development phase and to investors and things like that, I think that one of the biggest factors is people think that they have a problem and they don't do enough in terms of their customer discovery. They don't talk to
Mm.
enough people. They say, oh, yeah, I have this really big problem. I'm going to design something to fix it. And all of a sudden, they spend all of this time and energy developing a product that they think is fixing a problem. And then they start talking to other people and they realize it's not really a problem. I worked with one gentleman once who had this great idea, wanted to spend all of this money on designing this urology project. And after working with him for a little bit and finally getting a sense for what he thought was the problem and why he thought it was a problem, he was an old school urologist. I realized he was still looking through the lens of this scope when he was doing his procedures. He was literally putting the scope up against his face. Everyone else uses a camera, so they have more visualization of the entire room. And it was just that element of talking to more people and realizing that his technique was different than everyone else. So his product really wasn't anything that was going to sell.
Oh, it's like an old school. It's like, yeah, this would have been innovative like 20 years
Right.
ago or whatever. Yeah, but like nobody does that anymore.
Yes,
I love that so much.
exactly. And when I talk to people about their customer discovery work and, trying to figure out what's going to make a successful product and what product is going to sell, there's a common problem with what we do is that we don't want to reach out to new people, right? We want to keep our circles close because rejection feels comfortable when it's coming from a friend, but your friends are also probably not going to be the people that are going to tell you the hard truths. And so I really encourage people that I work with to reach outside of their network. So if you went and you did your residency on the East Coast, try to find some folks out on the West Coast because maybe they do stuff differently out there, right? Maybe their insurance reimbursement schemes are slightly different. And so how you think you're going to get paid for your product, you're not actually going to get paid if you try to bring it to the other coast, right?
Oh, that's
Maybe they have
interesting.
different solutions. talk to people that are trained DO, MD, nurse practitioners, PAs,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because everyone's going to have a slightly different take when they're solving problems.
I just think about like people on Epic have one opinion and people not on Epic have a completely different opinion. But
I'm pretty sure
that's
most people that
actually,
are not on Epic are jealous of the people that are on Epic.
yeah. So you're pro Epic.
I'm pro Epic. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. Am I allowed to say that I'm pro Epic? I'm very, very pro Epic. I know
You
that
know,
I've worked.
I should have taken like a like a poll today in this board meeting I was in to see who was pro Epic, who was not.
It's just, I mean, this is going down a way different rabbit hole, but uh, it's amazing to me that in this day and age in medicine, it is so hard to exchange medical information.
Uh-huh.
Epic does a
Hmm.
really nice job trying to streamline that.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the smoothest products that I've used. Maybe, I mean, I'm an Epic baby. So my residency was on Epic, my fellowship was not, and it affected my training. I really
Mm.
strongly think it affected my training. But again, Epic is a perfect example of a company that has invested drastically in customer discovery. They're not just taking a product and saying, here, digest this,
Mm.
learn how to use it. They're taking a product, they're going out into the field, they're very interactive with the hospitals that they work with. They do custom builds for the hospitals that they work with. So
Mm-hmm.
not all Epic is created equal. They're bits and
Mm-hmm.
pieces, and the hospitals themselves usually have these Epic teams together where they talk to
Mm-hmm.
each other and say, okay, how can we make your workflow better? How can we help you? And I think that
Mm-hmm.
they as a company are constantly growing, constantly innovating, and constantly thinking about the well-being not only of the patients but of the providers and how they can leverage their system to
Mm-hmm.
benefit everyone.
Interesting. I love that. I love that. I mean, you think about, I feel like coming from a technologist standpoint, right? We always think tech will solve all the
Mm-hmm.
problems. And so for you kind of being more on the provider side and of course having experience in medical devices and things like that, uh, when you look at innovation in the field, do you still think technology is the only way to go? Or are there other ways you feel like are innovating
Yeah.
within your field?
So I love that question because I really always encourage people to address problems not with a solution in mind. So
Mhm.
usually people will say, "Oh, I have this idea for a great problem, for a great product." Excuse me, and they say, "Can you build this for me?" I say, "Hold on, let's take a step back, because the thing that you really have to identify is what problem are you trying to solve."
Mhm.
Because when you go down to the root cause of what the problem is, sometimes it isn't a technology. Sometimes you realize that it's a culture change in your hospital that really needs to be addressed. Sometimes it's a workflow. Uh, you know, you can sit here and you can say, okay, Ozempic, right? Perfect example.
Mhm.
People, there's a weight loss issue in our country. So let's
Mhm.
develop a drug to address the weight loss issue. Great. But really, there are other techniques that need to be addressed too, right? There are lifestyle modifications. There's our food sourcing and access to healthy food and addressing food deserts in our society. We can go down that whole political like landslide, right?
Mhm.
But the answer to that question isn't necessarily just, okay, let's develop a drug for it.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
sometimes there are different pathways, and sometimes those pathways are a little more efficient to institute a culture change within a hospital system rather than buying a band aid. Most
Mhm.
patients that come and see me in my practice get a lecture, and they get a little bit of a tough love lecture because, there are some problems that absolutely need surgical solutions. You're not
Mhm.
going to fix it without surgery. But a lot of things that we see in our practice can be addressed with lifestyle modifications. I can give you a pill, but if you come to me and you have an overactive bladder,
Uh-huh.
if you have leaking urine, usually it's because you're constipated or you're drinking too much caffeine. So I can give you a pill, that's your technology answer, right? Or
Oh.
I can work with you to figure out, okay, how are we limiting the stress in your life? How are we getting you more sleep? How are we
I
limiting
didn't even
caffeine?
know that.
Yeah. And
Yeah, that's crazy.
usually when I talk to my patients, the mother's eyes light up or the father's eyes light up because they're like, oh, I need to start doing that.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? So medical device development is no different. So
Mm,
one of the really critical things in developing your device, because ultimately you want to develop a device that people want to buy, they want to use because it's really going to solve a problem in an efficient and effective and economical fashion,
mm-hmm,
right? So when you're developing a device, you want to make sure that you're actually solving a problem that's out there.
mm-hmm.
And sometimes, like I said, it's not a device that's needed. It's just culture change. It's a tech,
Okay.
it's maybe
It's a people
it's a
problem.
people problem. And maybe
It's a
it's
people
a
problem.
digital health product. Maybe they need to come to
Mm-hmm.
this dot, right? And say,
Mm.
okay, how do I make my people more efficient rather than how do I develop a device that makes the process more efficient?
So I think medical device, right? Everybody, because this in this podcast we talk a lot about technology, and I think a lot of people might not be so familiar with medical devices. Um, for medical device, like give us some examples of medical devices, probably even the ones that like you wouldn't even consider a medical device, that are a medical device.
Hmm. Uh, so medical device, you're going down a rabbit hole about regulation, right? So a
Mm-hmm.
lot of medical devices are regulated based on the claims that they make.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Aura Ring, for example, right? Your
Mm-hmm.
whoops, right? These are monitoring your
Mm-hmm.
pulse oximetry. These are monitoring your heart rate variability, which is changes in kind of how your heart is beating from beat to beat.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, they're measuring your heart rate. They're measuring your respiratory rate, but they're not considered medical devices because they're
Mm-hmm.
considered this class of devices called wellness devices because of the
Mm-hmm.
claims that they're trying to make. And
Mm-hmm.
so as you're
Mm-hmm.
navigating that pathway of is something a medical device, is something not a medical device, you have to be really careful about your claims.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're trying to develop a product, it's important to start being familiar with the class systems that the FDA has set out. You know, class one, class two, class three medical devices, because that's going to significantly affect your regulatory pathway, the time to development, the cost of development,
Are you familiar with the SNU?
the SNU.
Like I know, yeah, the
I,
SNU. It's a bassinet basically that like like if the baby cries, but it just got FDA approval and like supposedly some insurances cover it right now, but I don't know what the classification is. And then there was another one where I can't remember the name of it, but for the
Owlet.
baby, the owlet,
I knew
yes,
exactly before you even said it. So
yes,
the
yes,
outlet
yes, the
is
owlet.
fascinating. You can Google a bunch of the information on this because FDA puts all of their notifications online, right?
Mm-hmm.
So outlet, and I haven't looked too much into this story recently to see where they're at, but I believe that they've now had FDA approval. But the FDA was
Mm-hmm.
like, hold on, you can't be making those claims how you're making it because it was marketed as a wellness device.
Well, the thing though about it though was beforehand you used to be able to like measure something through the app,
Mhm.
but the new outlets, they actually had to change it.
Right.
So the benefit of the old outlets was you could wrap it around the baby's, you know, toe,
Hmm.
and then it would like, measure the breathing or whatever it
Right.
is. Now the new outlet won't you can't do that.
Right.
So it changed.
It,
And honestly, it's not as great, but I get it. Like, there was
have
like
you used it?
probably some yes, yes. I used the old
Okay.
one, but the new one it's like, and the new one you can't actually even download the app anymore. So I was kind of at the point where like, the way the old outlet worked, you can't. And I can't remember the exact details, but honestly, I was like, well, this isn't even like that useful anymore.
But so outlet
But
outlet is the perfect example. So I believe that
mhm,
how outlet was working was it was giving you, I believe, a respiratory. So for those that aren't familiar with
mhm,
outlet, device for newborn monitoring, and you would wrap the
mhm.
sensor, I believe, around the toe,
Yeah,
and
which is what they use in like the NICU or whatever,
right,
right, to monitor
and
the
and
breathing.
the purpose of this was supposed to be an apnea alert. Apnea, the baby stops breathing. There's a condition called
Mhm,
sudden infant death syndrome,
mhm,
right? And this is to monitor your baby so you know if the baby has stopped breathing or not.
Mm-hmm.
But when you're giving numbers and diagnostics and ranges, that changes your indications. And depending on the indications that you're claiming for a
Mm-hmm.
product, that's when the FDA is going to start stepping in.
I Googled it. So basically, it was that the older smart sock would focus on immediate alerts for drastic changes in vital signs,
Right.
right?
Right.
Whereas the new one is just like monitoring oxygen saturation and heart rate.
Right. So if it's giving you an alert, it's now functioning as a diagnostic. If it's just
Mm,
giving you a
mm,
number, then,
interesting.
this just gives me a number. That's it.
Uh huh.
This is my
Uh
Whoop,
huh.
right? It just gives me a number.
Yeah.
If it's giving me an alert saying your blood oxygenation is low, now it becomes more of a diagnostic. And now the FDA
Huh.
steps in. Now it's no longer
But Apple does that, don't they? Don't they? Doesn't Apple like with your heart something like it'll be like, hey, your something's changed or something
right.
like
So Apple
that?
got FDA approval for that. So
Oh, go
Apple now
Apple.
has a lot of FDA approvals within their products, and
So they're considered a medical
they're
device now.
considered a medical device.
Amazing. Okay, everyone go buy Apple stock now.
Been
No, I
around for a
love
while.
that. Okay, so I guess my other question, right, is like kind of when you merge together. So you obviously have like all this medical. I mean, there's just it's such a big developing medical device. It's like you have to deal with how you're going to get paid. You have to deal with so many other
Mhm.
different use cases and people, right? Like the provider, the patient, the insurance, the FDA. But then when you think about technology, right? Like developing applications or things like that, how does that kind of all tie into all of this? Or is it kind of a secondary, like a second thought, if you will?
So when I talk to people that want to develop medical devices and they're sitting in their
Mm-hmm.
garage and they're trying to figure out, okay, how do I get started? I have this clinical problem. The thing that you
Mm-hmm.
have to do is look at really 5 pillars. Okay, so there are 5 things that you have to consider when you're developing a medical device. Clinical need, number one. Your clinical needs statement and your clinical needs
Mm-hmm.
documentation that you're putting together is a living document that's going to evolve over the course of development. But these are all the factual information that you're going to put together about a clinical problem that's out there, how significant that clinical problem is, and what problems have been, what solutions have been tried to fix that problem, and what's missing from the solutions that are already out there. All right. So this is now your guiding document for anything that you're going to build in the future. Your clinical needs document is going to feed into your market, right? So now you have a clinical problem, you know what's missing in all the solutions that are out there, but you need to put out a market assessment. Okay, so who are you competing with when you're trying to build out this product? Are you going to be competing with the Strykers and the Medtronics and the Becton Dickinsons in the world, which you're kind of a small fry? Or are you setting a blue ocean? I love the book Blue Ocean Strategies. So looking at who your competitive markets are, how successful they are, what's missing from their products, what you need to do for your medical device development to make a product that is going to be able to compete with them. Okay, so you have your clinical needs statement, you have your market assessment, you have your technology development, which is really going to be one of the last things because everything's going to pull into it. But you start brainstorming out once you have your market and your clinical needs. Okay, what is my technology going to start looking like? And once you start formulating what that technology is going to start looking like, now you have to start looking at your IP and your landscape. So can I protect this for intellectual property? Right. So you do your Google patent search and look at the prior art that's out there, look to see what you can patent, what you can't patent, where you have freedom to operate. So now you have your clinical needs assessment, you have your market assessment, you have some of your technology developed, you have your IP assessment. You're going to continue with your technology development through all this whole process. And then you're going to look at your regulatory and reimbursement strategies. How are you going to get paid? How am I going to get through the FDA? Is this an FDA process?
I feel like most people say look at the reimbursement strategy first because don't spend time building something where you don't know how you're going to get paid.
Right. So this is not a stepwise process. This is really a circular process.
Okay,
But
got it.
because you kind of have to have an idea of what you're going to build
Mm-hmm.
and what your solution is going to look like before you start looking at regulatory. But then once you look at regulatory and reimbursement, okay, maybe you have to tweak how your device is built or you have to tweak the claims that your device is making.
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I read a statistic once that it takes 3 to 5 times more data to get approval for CMS than it does to get clearance or approval by the FDA. So people focus so much of their time and energy on getting their FDA clearance or approval.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the type of
Right.
device that you're developing. Um, and they just assume that they're going to be able to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't
Mm-hmm.
realize that sometimes if you need a new reimbursement code, this is a
Mm-hmm.
really long, hard process. So you can have devices that make it through FDA and actually tank, right? Because they
Mm-hmm.
can't get paid. One of the reasons
Mm-hmm.
continuous glucose monitors is a great example of this. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Continuous glucose monitors were as successful as they were because there was passion behind the project for the companies that were developing them. Because it took years after these were approved for private payers and then subsequently CMS to actually adopt them. Why? Because yes, we knew that they were giving a more accurate uh, picture of what someone's day-to-day blood glucose was doing. People that were using them noticed an impact. But in order for the insurance companies to want to start paying for it, you had to show that there was an actual health benefit to that tighter blood sugar control.
Mm.
So they went a long time with a small percentage of insurance companies actually being willing to pay for this. Then
And
once
it's
CMS
still
approved,
it's still pretty small too. It still is pretty small.
it's hard to
Okay,
get the approval. Yeah.
for those of us who don't know, CMS. What
CMS,
is CMS?
Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So
Okay,
that's
so this is like the payer, the figuring out how
traditionally,
to
and
get
we're
paid.
getting a little bit away from this now.
Mm-hmm.
Traditionally, most of the private insurers took their lead from
Mm-hmm.
CMS in terms of if CMS was going to approve paying for something, the private insurers were going to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So again, the blood glucose, continuous blood glucose monitor is an example of a situation where that has shifted,
Mm-hmm.
where the private payers were the first ones to adopt it. So
Mm-hmm.
you're starting to see some shift away from that because the
Yeah.
bureaucracy behind CMS is so slow.
I do love seeing people adopt CGMs everywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
The fact that you can buy it off the shelf, for whatever $30 for a few weeks or something like that. I mean, it's kind of amazing how I don't know, prevalent it has become. And I
It's
think it's because also you're seeing a lot of people like influencers
mm-hmm.
promoting it as a way of like, like weight loss, or not just weight loss, but I see a lot of like bodybuilders, for
Yep.
example, promoting it and things like that.
I know personally, I wore a CGM for probably a year,
Mhm.
and it helped me make some really significant lifestyle changes. It made me
Mhm.
really focus on, I had a quick temper. I had a quick temper in the
Mhm.
hospital when things weren't going well, when someone didn't listen to what I said and things like that. I probably do still a little bit.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um, but I internalized a lot of stuff too. So when I say I had a quick temper, I would get upset. I
Right.
see
Right.
how it affected me personally, but
Mhm.
this is my speculation, right? When I started wearing a CGM, I would see those blood sugar spikes.
Oh, like when you get
When
pissed?
I would
You
get
can
mad,
see it.
like I could tell when I was commuting. I could
Really? Oh my
absolutely tell when I
god.
was driving through Atlanta traffic because my blood sugar would
No
go really, really high.
way.
I remember one,
I've
yeah,
never I've never seen that before. I have to now. So I actually have I wear a Dexcom. I haven't worn it for a while, but like now I want to put on my Dexcom again.
yeah.
Okay, Emily, this was such a great conversation. We obviously need to have you on again. This was so much fun. Where can we find you online if we want to learn more?
So Blum IM LLC is
Mhm.
my consulting group that I
Mhm.
consulting group. Uh, so Blum IM LLC is my website, and that's where I do all my private consulting work through. I've started working with Wave Strategies up in Cincinnati, and they do a lot of uh, all that assessment work that we're talking about, the market fit. They can help out with the regulatory strategy. They can help out with business strategy and things like that for people that really don't know what their kind of pathway to market might look like. That's a great organization. And then when it comes to medical device development and the product development, I've started working with Slingshot Designs here in Atlanta to actually get prototypes built for people that want to see, okay, how is this actually going to feel in my hand? How is this going to work?
That's so cool. That's amazing. Well, definitely check Emily out. She's also on LinkedIn, so you can hang out with her or send her a note there or visit her website. And thank you so much for joining, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for having me, Tracy. This is a lot of fun.